So imagine you've spent like 3 entire years memorizing every single rule of English grammar. I mean, you've got thousands of flashcards.
Oh, the endless stacks of flashcards.
Right, and, like 10,000 vocabulary words. So you walk into your very first corporate office job, you sit down at the big meeting table, and your new manager looks at you and says, "All right, team, we need to bite the bullet on this project before we call it a day."
And instantly, sheer panic sets in.
Total panic. Because suddenly, despite all those years of studying, you have absolutely no idea what is going on. I mean, are there actual bullets involved? Is the day ending right this second?
It really is the ultimate language learner trap, isn't it?
It really is. Today, we're basically cracking the code on why knowing the dictionary will only get you, like, halfway to fluency. Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. We are on a mission today to take your English from that stiff textbook level to sounding completely native.
Because, we all crave logic. Especially when learning a language. We want it to act like a clean, predictable math equation, right? Like, an apple is an apple, to walk is to walk.
Yeah, but native speakers just do not operate in pure logic.
Exactly. They operate in culture, they operate in shared history and shared feelings.
I always like to think of it kind of like building a computer, memorizing your vocabulary, your grammar rules. That's really just buying the hardware. You have your monitor, your keyboard, your processor.
Right, it looks like a computer.
It looks exactly like one. But idioms are the actual operating system. They're this complex, kind of invisible cultural software that makes the hardware actually run and, like, connect to the internet.
That is a phenomenal way to picture it, actually. And as ESL teachers, we witness this exact transition constantly. It's so cool.
Oh, it's the best part of the job.
It really is that magical moment when a learner stops just, directly translating words in their head and starts actually running that cultural software. Because an idiom is essentially a phrase where you have to completely abandon the literal meaning of the words to understand the true message.
Exactly. And honestly, the true message is usually just about navigating the messy reality of being a human. So today, we're looking at a collection of essential English idioms that perfectly map out a normal workday. And if we look at the reality of a workday, it rarely starts with triumphant success, right?
No, definitely not. It usually starts with, resistance.
But you wake up, your alarm goes off, and something just feels fundamentally wrong physically.
The dreaded morning hurdle.
Yeah, you're sick. But, how do you communicate that you're sick to your boss without making things incredibly weird? That brings us to our first piece of cultural software, which is under the weather.
Such a classic phrase.
It really is. It basically means feeling slightly ill or sick. But there's a massive social utility to this phrase, isn't there? Like if I have to miss a meeting, I might text my boss, "I can't come to the meeting today. I'm feeling a bit under the weather."
What's fascinating here is the utility of that phrase. It's entirely about what linguists call linguistic distance.
Linguistic distance.
Yeah, so think about the environment of a workplace or like a university classroom. It requires a certain level of professionalism and a certain boundary of privacy.
Oh, for sure.
Right. So if you wake up with a terrible stomach virus or a really nasty head cold, you obviously have to communicate that you can't perform your duties, but you really, really do not want to force your manager to think about your biological realities.
Right. Nobody wants to receive a text at 7 a.m. that says, "Good morning. My digestive system is currently in a state of absolute chaos."
Right. It's just way too much information.
Yeah, it makes everyone uncomfortable.
It does. It makes the receiver uncomfortable, and it puts you in a super vulnerable position. So we invent these vague metaphors to put a buffer between ourselves and the uncomfortable reality of having a human body.
That makes so much sense. So under the weather is kind of like the perfect social shield.
Exactly. It's vague enough to protect your medical privacy, but it's universally respected as a valid reason to stay home.
It's almost like a gentleman's agreement. Like I say, under the weather, you don't ask any weird follow-up questions, and we both just preserve our dignity.
Precisely. It softens the biological reality into this gentle, meteorological concept.
Right. Okay, but let's say you wake up feeling a bit under the weather, but it's not quite bad enough to cancel your whole day. You have obligations, you have a meeting you can't miss, or some errand you absolutely have to run.
Right, you can't always just stay in bed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the natural human instinct when you feel bad is to put things off. You procrastinate. But eventually the procrastination has to end. You got to face the music.
You have to force that transition from avoidance to action.
And the phrase native speakers use for that exact moment of forced action is bite the bullet. It means to force yourself to do something unpleasant or difficult that you've been actively avoiding.
The classic example being, I hate going to the dentist, but I just have to bite the bullet and make an appointment.
Right. But I have to ask, though, because as a learner listening to this, using a phrase like biting a bullet feels incredibly dramatic.
Oh, it's very dramatic.
It sounds like a line from like a war movie.
Yeah.
And we're using it for something as completely ordinary as scheduling a teeth cleaning. Isn't there a disconnect there?
Yeah.
Like, why use such violent, intense imagery for making a phone call?
Well, it is a dramatic image, absolutely. And the history of it is actually literal.
Wait, really? Like a literal bullet?
Yeah. Before modern anesthesia, soldiers wounded on the battlefield would literally be given a soft lead bullet to bite down on during surgery.
Oh my.
Yeah, it was to help them cope with the excruciating pain and keep them from screaming while the doctors worked.
Wow. Okay, so the origins are literally a war zone.
Yes. But to answer your question about why we use it for a mundane dentist appointment today, it is all about psychology. It's essentially the ultimate validation of your own anxiety.
How so?
Well, making a phone call to the dentist is obviously not physically dangerous, but to the person who has been avoiding it for 3 weeks, it feels monumental. The friction in your mind is massive.
Ah, I see. So it's less about the actual severity of the task itself and more of a psychological trick we play on ourselves. We make the task sound like a life or death battle, so we feel brave for finally doing it.
Exactly. You're acknowledging how difficult that mental barrier is. When you say, I'm going to bite the bullet, you're validating your internal struggle. You're saying, I know this is going to be incredibly uncomfortable for me, but I am choosing to endure it.
Right. It's a declaration of personal resolve.
Exactly.
That reframes it completely. Like, you aren't going to war with the dentist. You're going to war with your own procrastination. You're conquering your own reluctance.
That is a perfect way to put it.
All right, so you've navigated the morning resistance, you dragged yourself out of bed, you bit the bullet, and you're finally sitting at your desk looking at the work in front of you. Now we move from starting the work to actually gauging the effort it requires.
Right, because work effort is a huge spectrum.
Huge. Sometimes you brace yourself for a massive battle, and the task turns out to be wonderfully simple.
It is always such a relief when reality is easier than our expectations.
Oh, the best feeling.
Yeah.
And the phrase we use to capture that pure relief is piece of cake. It basically just means something that is very easy to do.
It's a great idiom.
Yeah, as an ESL teacher, this is the example I always love giving to a panicked student right before a test. I'll just say, don't worry about the English exam, it'll be a piece of cake.
And it immediately lowers the blood pressure in the room. Right?
It really does.
Yeah.
But if we look at the mechanics of this idiom, I'm just fascinated by the sensory contrast here compared to our last phrase. Like, we just talked about biting a bullet.
Right. Which is hard, metallic, dangerous.
Yeah, it requires gritting your teeth in pain. And now, to describe the complete opposite experience, the English language reaches for dessert.
We encode the concept of ease with sugar and softness.
Exactly. Eating a piece of cake requires literally zero physical exertion. It's soft, it melts in your mouth, and it triggers this instant release of dopamine. It brings immediate joy.
Oh, for sure.
So when you tell someone a scary task is going to be a piece of cake, you are just giving them a data point about the difficulty level. You're offering them, like, a psychological bomb.
You're promising them that the experience will not harm them. It's a deeply comforting reassurance.
Yeah.
It essentially says, you can relax your shoulders. This will not deplete your energy.
Don't stress. It's just cake. It's brilliant. But of course, the reality of adult life is that very few things are actually a piece of cake.
Unfortunately, yes.
Most of the time. The work is hard. It's a grind. You push through hour after hour, and eventually the joy wears off, the energy depletes, and you just hit a wall. You have absolutely nothing left in the tank.
The inevitable end of the effort spectrum.
Right. And that introduces a completely different and frankly much trickier social problem. Like, how do you stop working without looking like a quitter?
That is the million-dollar question in most offices.
Seriously. And this is where the idiom "call it a day" becomes essential. It means to stop working on something because you've either done enough or you're simply too tired to continue.
So the classic example would be, we've been studying for 6 hours, let's call it a day and go home.
Yes. But why is this specific phrase so important?
Well, I am so glad you brought up the social problem aspect of this, because call it a day is not just a synonym for stopping. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is an incredibly sophisticated tool for navigating group dynamics and office politics.
I imagine that's because no one wants to be the first person to stand up, pack their bag, and say, I'm exhausted, I quit.
Exactly.
Like if you're in a team environment, whether it's a study group or a corporate boardroom, saying, I quit, makes you look like the weakest link.
Yeah.
It makes you look like you aren't a team player.
Yes, the guilt of the first departure. It's a very real pressure cooker. Everyone in that room might be silently praying to go home, but they're all playing a game of chicken, just waiting to see who breaks first.
Oh, the 5:00 p.m. standoff. I know it well.
We all do. And call it a day is the diplomatic key that unlocks that standoff. Notice the phrasing. It's almost always used with let us call it a day.
Oh, true. It's an invitation to collaborate.
Exactly.
So it changes the framing from an individual failure to, like, a collective victory.
That is the exact mechanism. When you say, let's call it a day, you're not saying the work defeated you. You are acting as the leader who is acknowledging the collective effort of the room.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is. You're saying, we have poured sufficient value into this project today. You're officially declaring the day's effort complete and granting the entire group permission to set a healthy boundary.
It's almost ceremonial. You're officially closing the curtain on the workday. You protect your own reputation because you aren't quitting. You're just managing resources. And you become the hero of the room because you rescued everyone else from having to pretend they weren't exhausted.
It's consensus building disguised as a casual phrase. It respects the integrity of the work, but it also respects the limits of human endurance.
That is a massive insight for anyone listening who wants to thrive in an English-speaking workplace. This isn't just a vocabulary lesson. This is literally a strategy for surviving office politics.
To go back to your earlier analogy, it's a very advanced piece of social software.
It absolutely is. So let's kind of look at the journey so far. We managed our health boundaries in the morning. We forced ourselves to push through our anxieties to get the hard tasks started. We enjoyed those rare moments of effortless work. And we successfully, diplomatically negotiated the end of a grueling shift.
A full, productive day.
Yeah. But work isn't just about managing tasks and managing your own energy. It's about people, specifically new people. Think about entering a completely new environment, like a networking event, a new classroom, or the first day at a new company.
For a language learner, those moments are often the absolute peak of anxiety.
It is terrifying. Which brings us to our final essential phrase, break the ice. The meaning is to say or do something to make people feel more relaxed and comfortable in a new situation.
So an example might be someone kicking off a high-stakes meeting. You could say, he told a funny joke to break the ice at the beginning of the presentation.
Right. And this is perhaps one of the most vivid metaphors in the English language.
Oh, without a doubt.
It really is. But let's actually look at the physical sensation it describes. Because it's not just a cute image. It is a very accurate description of how human beings process social anxiety. Like imagine you walk into a room of strangers. No one's speaking, people are just looking at their phones, staring at the floor. That awkward silence actually feels heavy, doesn't it?
It really does. It has a physical weight to it.
Yes. The tension feels like a solid object in the room. It literally feels like a frozen layer of ice trapping everyone in their chairs. You can't move naturally, you can't speak freely because the environment is quite literally frozen solid.
And this raises an important question, right? The key mechanism of this idiom is what it demands of the speaker. It demands intervention.
What do you mean by intervention?
Well, think about literal ice on a winter lake.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get through it, you can't just stand there and passively wait for the sun to melt it.
Right, that takes hours or days.
Exactly. And in a social setting, if you just wait for the awkwardness to naturally dissipate, everyone will just sit there shivering in the silence until the event ends. You have to actively pick up a tool and strike it.
You have to shatter the tension on purpose.
Exactly. Breaking the ice requires an intentional, sometimes risky action, just like the person in the example who chose to tell a joke. They didn't just clear their throat and start reading boring slides. They recognized the frozen environment, and they used humor as their ice pick.
That makes total sense. You can use a joke, you can offer a genuine compliment, you can ask a surprising question, but you have to strike the ice. And once you do, the structure of the tension shatters, and the conversation can suddenly flow underneath, like water.
And for a learner, internalizing this idiom is deeply empowering, I think, because it names that horrible, tight feeling in your chest when you walk into a new room. It reminds you that the silence isn't a personal failure, and it's not permanent. It's just a physical state of the room that requires a tool.
I love that. The tension is not a failure. It is just a temporary barrier waiting to be broken. You just have to be brave enough to swing the ice pick.
Which, ironically, usually requires you to bite the bullet first.
Oh, nicely done. It all connects. We really have mapped out the entire human experience of a workday today.
We have covered a lot of psychological ground.
We really have. Let's tie it all together, because you can realistically experience this entire emotional arc in a single Tuesday. You wake up feeling a bit under the weather, tempted to hide in bed, but you validate your own struggle, you bite the bullet, and you show up anyway.
Right.
Hopefully the morning meetings are a piece of cake and don't drain your energy, but if the afternoon drags on and everyone is staring blankly at their laptops, you step up as the leader and suggest everyone call it a day. And then the very next morning, you walk into a room of new clients, feel that heavy silence, and use a quick story to break the ice.
It is the complete cycle of professional survival, entirely encoded in figurative language.
It really is. So, to you listening, our challenge is very simple. We want you to start hunting for these phrases. When you turn on your favorite English sitcom tonight, or when you're sitting in the break room at the office, listen closely. You're going to hear these 5 phrases everywhere now that your brain knows to look for them.
You won't be able to unhear them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But more importantly, you now understand the social engineering behind them. You understand why your colleagues are using them. You don't just have the hardware anymore. You are officially running the software.
Which leaves us with a rather profound question to ponder as we wrap up.
What's that?
Well, we started by agreeing that idioms require us to abandon the literal definitions of words. Right. An apple no longer means an apple. But if that's true, what does that actually reveal about the nature of language itself? If you think about it, mastering a language's idioms does not just make you sound native. It actually grants you access to the hidden psychology of that culture. It shows you exactly how those people view sickness, how they process the anxiety of work, how they seek comfort, and how they navigate the incredibly delicate dance of social tension.
That is fascinating. Language isn't just a tool for sharing information. It's a window into how a culture processes the friction of being alive. That is something to seriously think about the next time you find yourself reaching for a piece of cake instead of biting a bullet. Keep listening, keep hunting for those idioms, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.